Okay, now we're going to start on number 5. It says Miss Carmen makes $350 for a 20-hour work week. And then it looks like she got a raise. Last year she began making .06 more. How much does she make now? Okay. The long way to do this is to take the 350 and, it says she made 6% more. Let me first say, okay, to change 6% into a decimal, we would scoot the decimal place over 2. That's how I'm getting this .06. The long way to do this would be to say, okay, let me see how much more she's making and multiply 350 times .06. And when you get that number, then you could add it back into 350. But here's the deal. If she's making 6% more, 350 was her 100%, right? But now she's making 6% more. So what we want to know is what is 106% of what she used to make, okay? So you could reword this question into 106% of 350. Now, if you use the decimal method, you would just then say, okay, well, I'm going to multiply 350 times, if I move the decimal place over 2 spots to change the percent into a decimal, it would be 1.06 times 350. Okay, so you could get your answer that way. But if you're going to use the ratio method, which I'm going to advocate for because I'm a real fan of it, we know that if 6% more would mean that what's 106% of 100? Here's my percent ratio. I always want 100% on the bottom, but this time I want to know what 106% is. And now we want what's our part out of our whole. Well, when I reworded it, you could see the of there. I made sure to use it. Of tells me the whole is 350. So my unknown value I could put up as my part. I want to know what is that amount of 350. Okay, so now if I want to solve this, all I got to do is cross multiply. And so you would have 350 times 106. When you solve these proportions by cross multiplying, and again, proportions are not going to go away. You're going to use them for lots of things, so you might as well get comfortable with them now if you're not comfortable. It's like trying to learn something when it's already a little familiar to you, and then adding in all kinds of ways you can use this tool called proportions. Now when I cross multiply that, I get 37100, 37,100. And if you remember, when we're doing proportions, we divide by the amount that's across from the unknown. And soon, if you're doing algebra, you would just set 37,100 equal to 100x. But if you don't know algebra, go ahead and divide by 100. And it ends up being 371 is what she makes now. And so that's how you could do that problem. Move through here to a nice clip because there's lots of problems to go through. Terry Clifford bought a dress for $46. Okay, that's the original price. The sales tax was 6%. Find the total cost of the dress. Okay, I could say what's 6% of $46, find that amount, and then add it back into $46, but that's a lot of extra math to do. If you think about it, this is the original price. That'd be like 100%. But I'm going to be charged 6% for tax, so really what I'm going to pay is 106%. Now, if I want to make my little ratio method here, if I have percents here, remember, it's always part to whole, and the whole is always 100% on a percent fraction over here. So I'm going to put my whole as 100, but what I want is 106%, 106 instead of 100. And see, I didn't even have to worry about moving my decimal at all, did I? It's just setting it up this way is so cool. Now, this $46, the original price is always my whole. Your original amount, whether it's a price or whatever it is your whole. So that's what's going to go on the bottom. 46 would have been the whole price, but now they're charging me tax. I'm going to pay more. The part I'm going to pay is the unknown. Okay, so to solve this, we could just multiply 106 times 46. You multiply the numbers that are across from one another. And when you do that, it ends up being 4876. And again, you divide by the number across from the unknown. The unknown is x, so the number across from it is the diagonal across from it. That's 100. And if I were to divide 4876 by 100, remember I could do that really quickly just by moving my decimal place to the left 2. That's what dividing by 100 does. So that would be 48.76. That's how much she paid for the dress. So yeah, I still had to do some adding, but it was adding easy numbers instead of going back and taking $46 and adding whatever 6% was to it. It's like I'm working faster by adding on easier numbers like what from the 100%. That's that whole percent increase decrease idea that we can make our lives a little bit easier if we'll think this way about it. Okay, number 7 says 12 is 25% of what number? Okay. I'm going to solve this with ratios. Again, you could do it another way, but honestly, I get confused sometimes about even how to set these up without the ratio method. Because the ratio method takes care of everything and makes it easy. If I'm using the ratio method, I have a percent fraction and I have a number fraction. And remember, it's always part to whole. Part goes on top, whole goes on bottom. Okay? Now, 25%, that's easy because that's 25 over 100. Percent means take that number, stick it over 100. I got half my problem set up already. Now, what is this 12? 12 is part of another number, isn't it? So I could know 12 goes there. If I wasn't sure, there's another clue in the words. Of tells me the whole is coming next. Ooh, the whole is missing. That's what I want to know, is what the whole is. 12 is 25% of some number, and I don't know what it is. So the whole is missing here, and I know it because it says of, and then there's not a number there. It says what number. It's telling me, hey, that's what you're trying to find. So 12 is the part. Now to solve this, every time you have a proportion, you can cross multiply. We went over in class why this works, but if you don't know algebra, it's kind of hard to understand it at this point in your life. So 12 times 100 is 1200. And then I'll divide by the number across from the unknown, the variable x. So what's across from it? 25. So 1200 divided by 25 is 48. Okay, my equal sign's not looking so great. It's 48. Okay, now I'm going to do number 8. My finger is not being picked up by the iPad very nicely. 40 is what percent of 70? The old way that you were taught to do it still works. You could put 40 over 70, divide it out, and get a decimal, and then move your decimal place over 2 spaces to the right. That's kind of a lot to remember, in my opinion. So this is where, again, the ratios are such a cool way to do this. Because in ratios, you always set it up the same. You got 2 fractions that are equal to them. One represents your percent and one represents your numbers. And they're always part to whole. Okay. Now, I don't know my percent. Isn't that what I'm trying to find? The percent is missing, but I know whatever it is, it goes over 100, and I know it's missing because it says what percent. Again, I always look at the percent first because if I can get that fraction out of the way, there's a little less to wade through in the problem. Now 40 is some part of 70. I don't know what part it is, but it is part of 70. So 40 is my part, and 70 is my whole. And again, one reason I knew 70 was the whole, of tells me that the whole is coming next, and that's what I have down there. Okay, so now we solve. Cross multiply. 40 times 100 would be 4 with 3 zeros after it. And you could either put equals 70x if you're cross multiplying. If you don't know how to do algebra, if you were doing algebra to get the x by itself, you would divide the 70 out of both sides. But if you don't know algebra, you would simply say multiply the 2 numbers across from each other. 40 times 100 is 4,000. And divide by the thing across from the unknown. Okay, so 4,000 divided by 70 is 57.14. Okay, so we'll just round to the nearest hundredths. It keeps on going, but if you round it, this is the number you get. What I did was I took the test, I just changed some numbers, and so I don't know if they're going to come out very nicely or not. So, if you have to round on any of these, round to the nearest hundredth. I think I have time for one more, so I'm going to go to the back. 1.5% of 800. This is number 9 on your review. Okay, 1.5% of 100. We could rewrite 1.5 as 1.5%. That would probably be a good thing to do because if we know with percents we could do some things with the decimal point, but that we can't do with fractions. Now, if I'm using the old method of doing it, the decimal method, which again I'm trying to convince you that maybe you don't want it as much as you think you do. If it's a percent, I would move the decimal place over 2 spaces to the left to get the decimal equivalent. That would be 0.015, and then of would mean multiply those two numbers out. If you can remember to do that correctly, that's pretty fast, isn't it? I'm getting 12. If you're not quite so sure about this, what you could do is use the ratio method. Ratio method always sets up the same way, and it always works. It's part to whole. And again, I have a fraction that represents my percent, and I have a fraction that represents my numbers here. Okay? So my percent is 1.5%, so I simply put 1.5 out of 100. That's what percent means, over 100. Okay? So you just copy the number down. Now the of tells me the whole is 800 because whole comes after of. The thing that I'm missing is my part here, so I can put a question mark there or I can put an X. Now what I can do now is just do what we always do with proportions, cross multiply. 800 times 1.5 is 1200. And then I'm going to divide by the thing across from the X or the unknown. Right here are the X and the unknown, so I'm going to divide by 100. 1200 divided by 100 is 12. No matter what method we use, we get the same answer, but the ratio method just lets me put things in the right slot instead of trying to remember, oh, how many spaces do I need to move the decimal point, and do I multiply this or do I multiply something else, So anyway, this gets us through number 9 on the review.